Okay, boys and girls, here we are again, yet for another one of my wrestling with the snake. It sounds a little bit dirty. I don't actually mean that. Python and iClone. I'm actually still pretty much of a newbie for when it comes to Python. So those of you that are more experienced will probably look at my code and go, "Oh crap, he really still doesn't know what he's doing," and that's probably true. Anyway, so what we're trying to do today we're going to do some things about lights because somebody mentioned lighting in some kind of alien spaceship or something. So let's talk about using Python to control some lights, or at least some things that light up. Let's put it that way. We're gonna talk about materials, not lights, material that emulate lights. So I want to show you first. Here's this scene. What we're trying to do is emulate this robot, and I'm getting closer and closer. I'm slowly modifying the model that I had to start with. But I wanted to show you that when he talks, I don't know if you'll actually hear the audio on here or not, but look at his eyes, and you see his eyes light up back and forth like that. And I've timed out how much these light up back and forth left and right, so I know the timing of those lights. So that's what I want to do today. I want to have his eyes light up back and forth. I've already done all the gear stuff. You saw all that hopefully in the first one. If not, go back and look at it. I don't know. So now I'm trying to work on that. So first things first, what I did is I created there's little globes that I call his eyes that are in here. And so if we go into the scene here, and we go to his eye, let's say, it doesn't matter which one, left or right. So they have basically some, they don't have any self-illumination on them yet. I might turn that on. It doesn't really matter for the purposes of me getting this started, but I could do that. When they're black and they're self-illuminated, you don't really see anything anyway, so it doesn't matter when they're off. But when I want to put this on, I want to make this turn this to a blue color. You saw that blue color in there. Then I can have some self-illumination. I can even add a little glow if I wanted to, but that's my main thing now is to change these from black to blue in the diffuse color. Okay? So parenthetically, we're going to back up a little bit. We're going to go to a new project here. I'm not going to save the changes there, because I want to show you something. If we were to, let's start off with a sphere here. So this is what I basically have for his eye, is a sphere here. And we go into the materials, and I'm going to get rid of the actual map, because we don't really need a map there. So now the sphere starts off black, so we'll have it black. Okay, starts off black, and what I want to do is then turn it blue. And once again, like I said, I could have self-illumination on it. It doesn't really matter for the purposes of this. So I get to a certain point in the timeline, and I change this diffuse color to blue. Okay, great, cool, that's cool. It looks like his eye lit up. But watch what happens as I pan along the timeline. You notice that it doesn't just go black to blue, it slowly increases to blue, okay? The reason for that is that the key that's dropped down there by default, if we go here to this key here, and we'll change to, we want to see materials, and we're going to go to materials, and we're going to go to this key, the material settings key here. By default, this key, whoops, let's get to the key. See if I can get this right. You have to kind of see it's a linear key, okay, linear. And what linear means, let's bring this transition preset so you can see what linear is. It starts from one particular spot, and then it goes in a straight line to the other. So in this particular case, it starts off as a black, and then it slowly goes linear. That's that linear curve to the blue. So it's never actually anywhere in between those two keys. It's never anything. It's never black or blue. It's somewhere in between. Okay. Only shades. No shades of gray. Only shades of gray. That's what we used to say. So what we really want is for this to be a step key. So if I change this to a step key, what happens is that the item stays, so it's black, 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 and then when it gets to that key, it hits that key and it turns blue, okay? That's all we would like. The problem is, so far at least, iClone Python doesn't have the ability to alter material transition curves. It does for other things, for some other things, but not for that. We're always going to be, at some point in stage, I believe, trying to work around the limitations of what's exposed to us. Luke, the developer, who's doing a lot of work on this, does a tremendous job. But he can only do so much, and he's getting there. So hopefully someday we'll have that. But in the meantime, how do we actually get that if we don't have a step key? So I'm going to undo that, and we're going to go back to now we have this slowly occurring here. So we have no ability to adjust the transition there. So how do we change that? Well, what we do is right before we get to, if we go here and we go to, like we move to that key. So right before we get that, the frame right before that, what we can do is set another key that's that same black key. So what happens is we're effectively creating a step. You notice that now it goes immediately from, so it stays black because it's black all the way through here. It gets to that last black key that holds it there, and then the very next frame it turns blue. So we've effectively created our own step key by doing that. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Hopefully. Very easy. It's an easy workaround. You could do that for step keys. You can't, unfortunately, I mean, you can actually do it for any key. If you really wanted to, you could make every single key a step key and then just program, put all your different steps in there. But that would be such a dramatic, which is why we have those transition curves. So, but just to know that you can work around the fact that we can't actually change transition curves yet in Python and for materials. Okay, so what do? So let's come back to, let's load back Robbie in here again. Take a look at him, and we'll look at the code I have to change his eyes back and forth. Now, the code without the ability to have the step keys is going to be a lot more complicated. So bear with me on this. So what we do is, first of all, I define the diffuse blue and diffuse black. These are, whenever you see things like this, whether it's Python or other programming, whenever you see uppercase kind of things in the used, those are usually always string literals. So this is, in this RLPY library, a literal, this BLUE, it's defined, and it probably equals some hex value or some other value that changes this to blue, okay? And there's a whole list of these. So now I knew that blue was there because in the examples they gave us, they show red, green, and blue, I think, red, green, and blue. I assumed there was also one called black. I didn't find that anywhere, but I just assumed that, and I was right. There is. There's almost surely one called white and yellow. The tricky ones would be what other things they might have defined. But so I made a good guess here. So anyway, I defined my own diffuse blue, diffuse black, because these are the two I'm going to use back and forth. These are the same scene calculations, excuse me, that I did with all the rotation stuff. So nothing tricky there. I'm just determining the length of the scene in terms of frames and in terms of seconds, so I know how to, because I've timed out those lights blinking on and off in terms of frames on the Forbidden Planet film, so I can work with frames easier than I can. So what I do here is I get a pointer to that object. We didn't discuss this in detail, but this is how you get a prop. So I say the left eye equals, and I find the object in that scene. It's a prop object, and it has that name. And this works even for subprops, which is very useful to know. So even though we come over here to the scene and prop, and so the Robbie rigged has a lot of different subprops. It actually has a subprop of a chest, and then in the chest it has a subprop of the head, and then in the head it has all these other subprops. Well, you can actually just go get this prop here, this left eye prop, and see there it is, or the little left eye there, by just referring to it by the name of it. So it's eye left, and so that's how you can grab it. So you can even grab subprops that way. I'm not sure what will happen if you have duplicate names, which you could definitely have. I assume it'll get the first one that's in there, but that also shows you that best practice is not to do that. So don't do that. So then we get the material component for that prop. That's just a thing to get all the material things that are associated with that. And then when we say get mesh names, you should be aware this doesn't always work. They're aware, the developers, particularly Luke, is aware that this is broken. So sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. In this particular case, it happens to work for my two eyes. So that's why I was able to do this. But if you do this, get mesh names, and you find out it's not returning anything, which it could definitely do, then you're kind of screwed. You kind of have to wait till it's fixed. But this is on their bug list, and so I'm sure it'll be fixed in the next patch. And then once we get the mesh names are just the things that are the meshes that are inside here, and there really should only be one, but we have a list. Because I haven't got this to work on other things other than the ones that have one mesh. I don't know what happens when you get a full list, but you have to return the mesh name, and that's how you get the material names. So then we get material names on the basis of those meshes. And materials, of course, you could have lots of different materials. In this particular case, we only have one material, which is always a zero assignment. That's how it works in Python. For those of you unfamiliar with Python, zero is the first element in any array. So we're going to grab that very first material, which is what we want to change. Okay? So we have all that, and we do the same thing for the right eye. So get all that done. So now comes the meat of the thing. So while the current time, so I'm saying I'm going to work through the timeline, and while where I'm at in the timeline is smaller than the actual length of the timeline, I'm going to do these things. And here's what we do. Now this is why this is a lot more complicated. If I had the ability to set the key transition, and notice I've left in that particular line here, but I've commented it out. If I had this ability, half of these lines will be gone. But because I don't, I have to separate those keys to bracket the actual changes. So all I really do here is I add a diffuse key at the current time with that mesh name and the material name, and then I change it to blue, and I change the other one to black. So I basically turn one on and turn the other off. But now I also have to, after I go forward to 30, it's really 34 frames that I want to go forward, but I go forward 33 and set another key for that same exact thing. So I really wouldn't need any of this. And then I go through one more frame. Add time. When the add time is, this is just the time calculation. The add time is the value of the scene divided by the frame, so I know how much time to add for each frame. So I go forward 33, put another key, go forward 34 one more time, put the change key. So now I change things back. I turn off the left eye and turn on the blue eye. And then I do the same thing for I add time again and do this. And basically that's all you do. The only other thing I want to mention here is that you need to use these time variables. You might be tempted to say, oh, the current time is just, oh, by the way, those of you that aren't familiar with any programming at all, this plus equals, this just means I'm taking this value and adding this value to it. So in the old days of programming, before we had this, we used to say things like this. And then whatever. So we would say, hey, this value equals that value that it was plus something else. But now they say plus equals. So, and you can also have minus equals, which basically means exactly what you think it means. It means this value minus another value. So anyway, I started to say is you have to use these RLP allusions to time. This is how you actually change a numerical value to a time value. So you have to keep doing that. And you'll get bit on the ass if you don't do that. And if you wanted to try to print out that value, you'd have to say get value. So this thing here is a particular type. So you can't just assume that this is an integer. It's not an integer. It's a time. It's a time. Okay. So anyway, that's basically it. So then when we do all this stuff, when we actually go ahead and run this. Go to the console log. Remember, I always have the console log open so I can watch, particularly if there's any errors that are going to come out, because I want to make sure there's no errors. And so now, after I've done that, you can see that these lights will blink on and off. And the left eye is always on longer than the right eye. If you watch that film, it's always left and then boom, 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 boom. And so it does that. And once again, it's made the calculations for the total scene time, so I didn't have to worry about any of that. And then with all the rotors, and we're going to get here eventually. I have other things I want to show you what I'm going to do. This is going to be a long project. We're going to get there, but I'll show you all of it together when we finally finish that voyage for those of you that stick with me. So thanks for watching, and talk to you soon.